We ask all our guests what they are doing to age well. But what about us? What have we learned about aging, and what are we as hosts doing to age well? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age, with my co-host, Corbin Bruton. This is the 300th episode of the Aging Well podcast. We have had a lot of knowledgeable guests over the span of 3.5 years. We have learned a lot. We have made some shifts in our thinking. In this episode, we'll explore what we are doing from the perspective of the SPIES model and our 6 pillars, all in the pursuit of aging well. The Aging Well podcast encourages informed decision-making and always consult your physician and scientific literature when making decisions about your health. So Corbin, this is our 300th episode of the Aging Well podcast, not counting bonus episodes, which probably puts us a little bit over that, probably even closer to about 310. But I thought it'd be fun for us to kind of, we ask all our guests, what are you doing to age well? Or what are you doing personally to age well? Maybe it's time we talk with our listeners and our viewers about what we are doing to age well. Because I feel like over the last 3.5 years, I've really learned a lot. My kids joke a lot with my wife that every time I have a new guest on the podcast, I'm changing my diet or doing something different in my behavior, and says, Dad's just changing his diet again. So let's kind of go through this from the perspective of our SPIES model. And for any new viewers or listeners, remember that is our spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social well-being that we have labeled as SPIES, or well-centered fitness. And with the perspective of our 6 pillars, which the 6 pillars, again, are exercise, physical activity, maintaining a healthy body composition, healthy diet, not smoking, getting good sleep hygiene, and most importantly, good, purposeful social connections. So where would you like to start?
I guess where I would like to start is, Dr. Armstrong, what are you doing to personally age well?
Well, again, where do you want to start? Because I'm working on all those different areas. So what do you say? Let's just go through kind of the SPIES model, because as we go through SPIES, we talk spiritual, and physical really tends to encompass those pillars a little bit more. So we can start with the spiritual. Hopefully that doesn't turn people away quickly from the podcast. And remember, when we talk about spiritual, and I get a little bit deeper into it in the We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast. So I'll give a little plug for that anybody that's looking for a second podcast to listen to on a weekly basis, they have that to go to. But we define spiritual as the mindset that there is something greater than self. And it doesn't have to be religion. It doesn't have to be what you're doing church-wise or not church-wise. It encompasses anything from a atheist belief to any faith of a higher power. And so for me, I mean, spiritually, that's a big focus. I guess one of the things that I'm doing to age well is offering that We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast, going in deeper into those areas. I would include some of my mindful practices, my journaling, and those types of things as being part of my kind of spiritual approach to aging well. And there's probably more, but let's hear, what about yourself?
Well, I mean, if we want to go down the spiritual route, most of our listeners know that for the last 5 years, I've been going down my own spiritual journey, and I've been walking with Christ. I've developed a relationship with him, and a part of that, what that looks like for me to age well, is just kind of, for lack of a better word, killing my old self and becoming a new version, the version that he created me to be. I feel like for me, there was this kind of little internal battle between the person I was tempted to be versus the person I'm created to be. And in order to understand who it is that I'm created to be, I have to have that good relationship with him. And there's this scripture, and it kind of talks about tithing, of giving that 10%, but it also talks about giving your first and your best. And what I try to do is I try to give my first and my best with the Lord. I am, first thing when I wake up in the morning, I'm diving into scripture and just reading, but I'm not just reading it to just kind of blow through it. I'm reading it, and sometimes I'll have to read it multiple times until something pops off the page and gets to me. And then whatever that is, whatever it's popping off the page, specifically in the book of Proverbs, I'm just sitting on that and I'm meditating on that almost all day long. And then it's just a matter of fellowshipping with him and having a conversation with him every day. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I gotta pray, I gotta like, oh, please do this, please do that. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's just having a conversation with him. Like, Lord, what do you want me to do today? Lord, get in the car with me. Like we're going on an adventure. We're driving. What a beautiful day it is. Wow, I can't believe you created this. And so just having that perspective, it also helps me have that Christ mindset, having more patience, loving each other, loving, just sacrificing my own self and giving I mean, I have a great marriage, and I'm really involved in our church community. I hope that answers the question. Is just kind of putting the Lord first, and then putting my marriage second, and then me third. So kind of going off of what you used to say in past podcast episode of I am three, and I just ever since you said that, I love it, and it truly is a good thing for me to stand on.
The phrase is actually "I am third." It's from Gail Sayers' autobiography. That's a statement that was on the desk of his track coach at the University of Kansas, and I mean, kind of refers to, in his case, it's my Lord is first, my friends are second, and I am third. I expanded a bit to my Lord is first, family and friends are second, and I am third. It's a really good principle. I think that's a good aging well principle to live by. I think it encompasses my aspirations spiritually. I have been on a journey of kind of going down a Teilhard de Chardin rabbit hole of kind of a broader spirituality, more than just my church faith. And again, if somebody wants to really dive into my church faith a little bit more, watch that We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast. I talk a lot more on that. I'm not really so focused on my church aspects because, religiously, I mean, yes, I'm doing things at my church, but I'm looking at the kind of broader aspects of spirituality as I'm attempting to age well. And Teilhard talks about the omega point and its spiritual evolution. And so it's this constant effort toward growth spiritually to better myself in terms of my relationships, not just with God or with Christ or, within my religious understanding, but to expand kind of beyond that. And I've been doing a lot more than just simply, church life. I'll kind of share early on in this episode, and I'm going to have an episode coming up on We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast that'll share this whole experience. But in my recent trip to Colorado, I had the opportunity. Regular listeners of this podcast will know Sandy Griffin. She's been on several different episodes of this. She's a very close friend of mine. It was revealed to me as I met her for the first time in person, her and her husband Griff, just this past weekend, and so a week ago. And then it's been almost 15 years that we've known each other and never met in person, and has become such a close friend. And when I arrived, I went to Colorado Springs to kind of visit them and to participate and help in their health and fitness expo. And so when I arrived at the expo on Friday to help with setup, I see Sandy in the distance, go over, and it was like, there was no feeling like I was meeting her for the first time in a physical presence. And it was just an amazing thing. And I met several other people that have been guests on this podcast and other podcasts that were at the conference. And it was that same feeling. And Sandy and Griff had another friend there, Sam, I've never met before, but it's like, I know him. And it was just such a spiritual feeling for me to just have a deeper understanding of that connectedness between us. Even though we might not connect in a physical presence, we get down into that deeper metaphysical, spiritual relationship of how we're all connected as one. It just gets a little bit deeper in some of those relationships. And this past Sunday, so the beginning of the week we're actually recording this episode, Sandy took Sam and I on a hike, and I had my first psilocybin experience, and trying plant, the kind of the traditional plant medicines of our ancestry, and it was not at all what I expected, but it was everything I expected. I just all of a sudden kind of realized I could see things in much greater detail, much greater clarity. Got up at one point to go walk to the restroom, and I realized, oh my God, everything is just brighter. There was distinct greens and golds and yellows and oranges, and the sky was brighter. And at one point, and kind of looking down over the hill, and there's this doe and a fawn come kind of running up the hill, and it's just staring back and just having this connection with the deer. And it was like, first of all, with my eyesight, I would never have been able to see the deer's eyes from the distance I was seeing. So everything was so crystal clear and amazing vision. And so I just felt connected with this deer, connected with the environment. And then, Sam and Sandy being right next to me, having their own experiences. And it was just like there was such a connection there that goes beyond understanding. And I want to leave that for that other podcast so that I don't take away from their conversation, and also just to kind of keep this short. But it's one thing I think we've been promoting a bit more on the podcast, becoming a bit more advocates for the role that plant medicine can play in therapy. And I plan on having Sally Roberts on here shortly. I hope I get her scheduled pretty soon to talk about her experience. I mean, she's had PTSD. She's had a tremendous turnaround in her life by going through psilocybin-assisted or psychedelic-assisted therapy. And so just kind of opening my mind up to other explorations of how I can become more deeply connected spiritually, not only to what I label as God, and I always spell God in kind of all small caps, similar to how in the Old Testament, in the Christian Bible, Old Testament, they label Yahweh as Lord in all caps. And so just kind of to me to represent that God is something bigger than I can perceive of my own, and that your perspective of God is going to be different than mine, and it's going to be different than probably every viewer, listener that is participating in this podcast today. And so having that openness to being able to recognize that, first of all, that my perceptions of God are limited, and that my need to grow is infinite. And that's kind of where I'm at with my spiritual aspect of my aging well. That was a long way around.
Yeah, that was that's a lot to unpack.
And usually that's why I do the other podcast, because there's a lot more to unpack in that pursuit. But let's move on to the next dimension of our well-centered fitness, or of SPIES, the physical, because that's where we can kind of get into our pillars a little bit more, and it'll obviously tie as well into the intellectual, emotional, and social. But physically, kind of what are you doing lately to... If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast.
Physically, I'm just trying to get more active. At the beginning of this year, I told our listeners that, hey, I'm gonna start getting back into shape. I need to lock in, and I said, listeners, hold me accountable. And I've been holding myself accountable. I don't know if it shows on camera, but I'm down 25 pounds from when I first said that. And I'm just trying to do a combination of everything that we talk about on this podcast and preach on. I throw in a little bit more of my routine, a little bit different. So after every meal, I actually have the luxury of, on my lunch break at work, after I eat my meal, I can go walk around the building, and I try and hit like about a 2 mile walk, just doing that lap after every meal to help regulate insulin levels and also just kind of be more active. And I know it seems really minute, but those 2 miles every single day, that adds up. And then I'm also adding in, I would like it to be a lot more, but I'm adding in 2 to 3 days of resistance training. And then I've learned that once you get off the bandwagon for so long, it's it, you're not as strong as you once were. And so I'm actually, I guess psychologically, I'm kind of getting over that ego lifting of, hey, I'm not here to focus so much on the heavier lifting and the strength of where I once was. Right now, I just need form. I need technique. I need slow and steady reps. And yeah, that's what's been helping me. And the one thing I do need to add more of is I need to add more stretching and balance style. So I'm actually upon the horizon. I'm thinking about adding maybe either like it's going to sound weird, a Pilates class or just something to help with balance and stability. Um, I think flexibility we kind of take for granted, but yeah, that's also something I'm recognizing about myself is I need that flexibility to continue to do movements, not just in the gym, but also in daily living. Like flexibility, it's surprising how important it is. I used
It's
to
not
never,
surprising. I mean, we talk about that all the time, the
I know,
importance
but
of.
I never used to stretch. And now that I'm in my coming up late 30s now, I'm like, man, it's really important to get that stretching. So
So, pretty much basic. Have you changed any behaviors in the kind of physical dimension since, 3.5 years of this podcast?
yeah, I mean, just being more active. And honestly, I'm trying to prioritize sleep, especially after all of these subject matter experts on sleep study talking about the importance of sleep hygiene. I just prioritizing sleep, prioritizing that rest, prioritizing that recovery, and then also just being strict on trying not to eat past 7. I've noticed when I don't eat past 7, I get a way better night's rest. So just, I mean, that's really it. Just be more active than I once was because I really got off that bandwagon and let myself go, and I'm getting back into it. And it's a journey, but we can't have an aging well podcast if we ourselves aren't going to be aging well.
Yeah. So I've been pretty much sticking to the same exercise routine, probably not as frequent as I'd like because this podcast has been taking a lot more of my time as we're doing 3 episodes currently a week, plus the other podcast, but, still, doing weights. I keep my weights kind of limited, very minimalist. If I can only do one exercise, it's going to be that Zercher squat. But I'm, getting the weights in. I'm lifting heavy enough to maintain strength. I'm really focused more on strength over bodybuilding style training or any of that kind of stuff. Getting on the treadmill a lot more, walking the dogs. But I think with the areas where I've changed the most and kind of altered my thinking a little bit more and unlearn some of the stuff that I've taught and been taught in exercise science over the years is really coming down to more of the diet and management of sleep a lot more. I've elevated sleep and social connectedness to a higher level than the importance of exercise in aging well. I know that's a shock since I'm an exercise physiologist, but that has been a big part of my approach is, what am I doing to get better sleep? So I'm tracking sleep more effectively. And I think we could talk a little bit about the technology that we might be incorporating in our pursuits of aging well, but tracking sleep. And I'm also changing my diet a lot more. I'm really struggling right now with how much protein to have or not have, because as we look at the different, we consider the different experts that we've had on, there's a pretty diverse perspective on how much protein is appropriate. Now, there's solid evidence in the research literature on longevity that protein restriction in animals can benefit the longevity. However, when we look at humans, we want to be able to maintain muscle mass. We have different function than mice. And so mice don't need as much muscle mass as we do. So caloric restriction may be much more beneficial to them. But I think we need a certain amount of protein in order to maintain muscle mass as we age. And in order to age effectively, to age well, we need to be gaining muscle mass. And so that's going to require some protein. That being said, caloric restriction is important as well, but not to the extreme. So I'm trying to eat less. I'm trying to really lower my body fat levels. Metabolism wise, that's been a little bit more difficult. So I'm looking at what do I have to do to adjust my sleep, cortisol levels, and other hormonal levels in order to improve on that sleep, get better exercise, and get better recovery. And so protein, I've shifted a little bit more to a more plant-based approach to eating. I'm not going to I don't ever think I can go full on vegetarian. We've had several guests, I would point out Lewis Burtis, Dr. Thompson, and Dr. Thompson was one that pointed me to Michael Greger's book, How Not to Age. He's got several others, How Not to Die, How Not to Diet. I assume they're probably all about the same. It really pushes a totally plant-based diet. I think I need a little bit more protein, so I'm limiting my protein a little bit more, eating less meat protein, trying to get more legumes, trying to eat more cruciferous vegetables, and I'll talk here shortly about kind of the role of sulforaphane, and trying to get more of that. But I'm shifting to trying to get the nutrients that are going to foster lowering my cholesterol, giving me more energy, helping my body to be more anti-inflammatory as opposed to pro-inflammatory, and eating like that. So that's one thing I think I've changed to a greater extent, is the diet piece, just trying to eat more fruits and vegetables, not be so focused on protein. I have never really been a big keto person, except for, maybe individuals who have certain neurological disorders could benefit from a pure, I'm going to underscore that, pure, strict ketogenic diet, not what a lot of people think they're doing in the ketogenic, which tends to be more carnivore approach, but trying to balance that continuum between vegetarian and pure carnivore to get adequate protein, good animal protein that's going to help build muscle. As we look at leucine and branched chain amino acids, there's a lot of controversy in the literature over that. On one hand, we can see evidence that leucine can increase risk of cancer and other things in the body. But on the other hand, it can also increase our ability to synthesize muscle protein. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to have a balance in that approach and not go overboard with the protein, but keep ourselves in a good balance, eat that protein in conjunction with exercise, resistance-based exercise, so that leucine, those amino acids are going into building the muscle, as opposed to floating around saying, okay, well, where are we going to go? Let's build this cancer cell. So I think there needs to be a balance in there, and we'll probably cover more of that as we go forward in some of the future episodes. Anything I didn't cover as we talk about kind of the physical side?
Yeah, after having all of the nutritionists or dietitians that we've had on this podcast, is there anything that specifically has stuck out to you where you're like, you know what, I'm either going to completely remove this one thing from my diet because the science, the literature, like that was such a mind alternating change of lifestyle that needs to happen? Or is there something where you're like, you know what, I never really paid much attention to this, I'm going to start adding this to my diet? And if so, how has that made you feel?
I'd say the only thing I've really said, okay, I've obviously I want to reduce meat a little bit, especially look at the quality of the meat that I'm eating, try and limit red meat, saturated fats. Probably should focus a little bit more on fish. I'm still going to stick with chicken, even though chicken can be a little bit more inflammatory, but try and eat it without any skin or fat on it. I have probably one big shift is I've stopped putting coconut oil in my coffee in the morning. Curious to see what that's going to do to my cholesterol levels. it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of the health benefits of it. And it's like, do I really need it in my diet? It's one way to reduce some calories. I don't need it in the coffee. So I'm stopping that, seeing what effect that's going to have, and really just focusing more on getting my fats and my oils from olive oil, avocado, nuts, and just the natural healthy fats in the food, trying not to add any additional fats in my diet. So that's probably one area I think I've probably cut the most.
For me, I mean, I've stopped for many years taking omega 3s, and then, once we started getting people to talk about the benefits of omega 3s, I started just adding that midday. And what I've noticed is it's really helped increase natural energy level, and it's actually helped me stay focused throughout the day. Now, the brand of omega 3s that I choose, they don't smell, because I thought that was really interesting. Where we were interviewing someone, and they said if your omegas smell, then the oil's gone rancid. And so I picked a brand where it doesn't have that funky fish water smell, and I'm not burping it up all day long. So that's kind of a benefit. And then when we interviewed Jigsaw Puzzles, or Jigsaw Nutrition, with
Jigsaw Health.
Jigsaw Health.
Patrick Sullivan from Jigsaw Health. Yeah.
Shout out to him. He provided us with some magnesium supplements, and yeah, I've been taking magnesium, different kinds of magnesium. Switch it up with magnesium glycinate. I use that with NAC, and then magnesium triglycinate to help with like brain function. And I feel great. So I don't know. That's those just some things I've done. And then obviously just really listening to people. Specifically, I think it was Dr. Farrow talking about what we put into our body and how it causes little miniature stress on the body. Pizza. I'm so weary to have pizza now ever since we talked about that. And I loved pizza. But just being aware that whatever we put into our body, like there's gonna be a huge effect, even if we don't recognize it, even if we don't see it. It's something's happened on a microbiological level, and being conscious of that, being aware of that.
Yeah, I think there's a big thing to be said just for eating overall healthy, whole foods priority, but enjoying some things. I'm going to enjoy pizza once in a while, but you know what? I'm not going to be going out of my way to buy. Well, I'm not going to go out of my way in the state of Oregon to buy pizza because it sucks. But when I go back to Pittsburgh, I'm going to get pizza. Or if I go to New York, when I went back in April, took some students to the National Conference on Undergraduate Research, I had to take them around, and I ate some crap food because it was something I can only get in Pittsburgh. I went to Permane Brothers, had my, Pittsburgher. And we went to, and I'm going to give a shout out to Slice on Broadway, which got the award this year in Las Vegas as the best cheese slice, and it is the best cheese slice of pizza I have ever had.
Nice.
And I've been to New York. I've had if you're in Chicago, you're going to tell me that your pizza's better, and that's not true. To me, Pittsburgh pizza is the best pizza in Pittsburgh, but overall, if you want really consistently good pizza, where you walk into a pizzeria, it's going to be good. It's going to be New York, maybe New Jersey. But Pittsburgh has the few really good pizza places that I've ever had. But there's nothing wrong with having pizza, but just be aware that it may have a little bit more of a disruptive effect on your sleep. It's not the healthiest of foods to eat on a regular basis, but enjoying, if you're going to enjoy the food, then it's okay. It's when we get into eating food and we take a bite of it and it's like, that was not what I expected. And next bite, that really sucks. Why am I keep eating this? That's the kind of food that we don't want to be eating. But if it's something you're doing infrequently in a moderate dosage and enjoying it and enjoying it in a social setting, I mean, if you're eating pizza by yourself, that's probably not healthy for sure, But if you're having, guests over and you get a good pizza and you enjoy that, then I think, a good approach to aging well, because we're going to have balance. I don't want to be Brian Johnson, who is overly restricting my life and is going to spend millions of dollars a year for, I think it'd be another 60 years or more no, more than that. I think he wants to live to 140. So he got about 90 more years on this earth, 80 years. 80 years of eating overly strict and drawing your kid's blood and all that kind of stuff is not how I want to live. But I want to age well in a way that I'm going to be healthy and functional and enjoying life. And I think that's a very important approach. You've kind of mentioned supplements. I've historically been a really leery of supplements. I've shifted a little bit in terms of omega-3s. I'm not as in favor of supplementing omega-3s. I'm really preferring to get it more out of food, whether it's, good quality fish sources like salmon, or we put flaxseed in our coffee when we brew it in the morning. I'm also putting flaxseed, hemp seed, chia seed, and wheat germ in my oatmeal, my steel cut oats that I'm pretty much eating every day. And those are very high in omega-3s. And just trying to limit the fats that are going to be either saturated or low in omega-3s or excessively high in omega-6 fatty acids. But if you're going to get a supplement, it needs to be one that it probably requires refrigeration. Capsulation is probably not the best approach. We had Udo, Udo's Choice. We had Udo Erasmus on, was it season 2 or maybe early season 3, to talk about omega-3s. And I think his product is really good because it requires refrigeration, and there's a very distinct difference in that quality versus, what I've seen in most capsules. Jigsaw Health has a good product. They have cod liver oil as well, which is something I would recommend, though I'm not taking it presently. But right now, the only real supplements I'm taking the magnesium SRT from Jigsaw Health, which, just to kind of help with muscle cramps, help with sleep, and just learning so much. We just had Morley Robinson recently to talk about the role of copper and how we probably overly focus on iron. And I encourage the viewers and listeners to go to that episode to learn a little bit more about how we may be making our bodies toxic by supplementing with iron and neglecting things like magnesium and copper in our diet. And so I've been focused on trying to get magnesium more from my whole foods, eating a lot more, like pumpkin seeds is a good source, eating nuts, but also supplementing that on a daily basis. So that's one supplement. Creatine is one that I continue to take. I take about 10 grams now a day, just for better brain health as well as for maintaining muscle mass. I'm actually consuming less whey protein, as I'm trying to a little less protein and focus a little bit more on the wholer foods approach to it. And just with timing, I probably want to go back to work and I need a quick meal. I'm probably going to go back to a little bit more whey protein. I'm trying to eat a lot more cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, because of the tremendous health benefits of those, and a lot more green leafy vegetables. But one thing I learned, and we just recently had Kathy Eason on from Berkeley Life, and talking about the importance of chewing your food more slowly, particularly those vegetables slowly, because if we chew them too fast or we don't chew them at all, we tend to lose a lot of the benefits of, like the sulforaphane and the other components that enter that can help to increase our nitric oxide or nitrates in our body to get better vascular function, just better immune function, better anti-inflammatory function, improving glutathione and other antioxidant functions within the body. But I also learned, the importance of copper and magnesium in ATP synthesis that, again, I've taught physiology for 27 years, and that has never come up in the reading or the literature or in any of the exercise science textbooks. And it's like, it is so important for the balance of calcium and magnesium for the muscle contraction, muscle function, but also cellular function in our mitochondria. And so I've been much more focused on trying to increase the quality of the vegetables that I'm getting, but also chewing them so that I'm getting good benefit from those. And I've also I just started tracking my nitrate levels. After the episode with Kathy and Berkeley Life, they sent me a starter kit and you get test strips. I tested yesterday for the first time. I was between low and just under threshold and took the supplement, and I was just above threshold. I tested this morning and I was above threshold. I was really more in an optimal level. So the supplement is immediately having a benefit for me. So I'm going to continue to try that, and we'll probably give some more feedback on how that is working. But, the importance of really maintaining our higher levels of nitric oxide, I'm trying to do, but also looking at other benefits. And we're going to have on the founders of Newson, which is a company that makes a product called Brad. It's BR_RAD. It's basically broccoli and radish. But their means of drying it out and powdering it and using sprouted broccoli as opposed to whole broccoli is just a very unique approach that gives you higher levels of sulforaphane that just have tremendous benefits. As, we look at the benefits of sulforaphane. You have the antioxidant, the anti-inflammatory. There's evidence of it being preventative for cancer, certainly for cardiovascular health, improving our cholesterol levels. So I'm curious what that's going to do for me, reducing inflammation. There's evidence of it benefiting our neurological health, reducing the risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It also helps the body to naturally detoxify by increasing certain enzymes in the body that can help us to reduce some of those harmful substances. It's also shown to have benefits in terms of glucose control, skin health, gut health. And so we can get that in our food. Again, broccoli is an excellent source, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, they all contain sulforaphane. Ideally, you want to chew it slowly, but this Brad supplement, I found it very beneficial. I mean, immediately my recovery scores have gone up as I track those.
Really?
But yeah, and you smell it and you compare it to, I've been using kind of a cheaper super greens powder that I've added to my whey protein and such. And you smell the difference. And they've done comparisons on like A1G or AG1. And essentially in a lot of those powders, because of the way they are formulated, if you do an analysis of it, and I encourage any viewer that wants to spend the money, see how effective their AG1 or their super green supplement is, to have it sent out to a third-party analysis, and you'll find that they're really low levels of any of the vitamins that they claim to be in there because they're all lost in the process. They might contain large amounts of all of these different greens and vegetables and such, but you're not getting the full nutrients out of it. You look at that BRAD or Brad and you actually open up and smell it. It smells like fresh cauliflower, and they purport to have, more in a teaspoon of that powder than I think it's at least a cup of whole broccoli. And so working on taking that. But the important thing, and the thing that I would stress above supplementation when it comes to eating our vegetables, is eating those vegetables slowly, chewing them. Because as I've learned rather recently is that there are enzymes in our saliva and in our mouth, and how those nitrates are triggered within the body and how those sulforaphanes are being released into the body is dramatically affected by how much time it spends in our mouth. And so, Kathy Eason said, because I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't be drinking my smoothie, put my broccoli in my smoothie. And she said, no, it's fine as long as you chew your smoothie. Because I'll put almost 8 ounces of spinach in a smoothie, and which is a great source of all these nutrients. But if I'm drinking it really fast, I'm losing out on some of the absorption of those nutrients. So when we're eating our broccoli and our spinach and our kale and all those things, take time to chew and to kind of savor and allow that to spend time in your mouth. And it's going to give you better oral health. It's going to give you better gut health, and it's going to give you better overall health. So that's one of the big things I think I've learned and that I've adjusted in terms of my nutrient consumption is just trying to eat more vegetables, but also savoring it. And I think if we incorporate into that having meals with other people and having conversation during those meals, taking our time to eat meals, we're going to get better health out of our nutrition, no matter what quality of food we're eating.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the more time it's spent in your mouth. Do you think that's a result of just kind of the enzyme breakdown process? Like we all have ketones in our mouth to help break down food, and then once we swallow it, it hits the stomach, and then the pepsins break that down. Is it just like, hey, it's getting broken down a lot more, and it's absorbed into the bloodstream a little bit in the mouth the more we chew, and then by the time it gets into the stomach, um, the pepsins can do their thing, and then they can break it down even more. Is that kind of the
That's
logic behind it, or?
No, I mean, there's more to it than that. And it's probably beyond kind of my scope of being able to articulate it very quickly in, in this particular episode, since we're covering so many different topics. But again, I would probably refer the listeners to the conversation with Kathy Eason, and also, Morley Robbins, to get a little bit more of that perspective on how these are absorbed. But it's more than just kind of what's going on in the gut. It triggers responses in the mouth, because we have a lot of nervous sensory connections within the mouth that feed this whole enzymatic process and help us to recycle nitrates in the body and so on. And so it's the presence in the mouth is triggering certain enzymatic reactions, but it's also triggering certain neurological reactions. And there's a lot going on in that process. And so if we eat our food too fast, it's going to have some effects on kind of delaying the overall process. And then generally too, then once it gets to the gut, if it hasn't been processed appropriately, it can have a negative effect in terms of the microbiome in the gut. I want to explore on this podcast a little bit more the microbiome and the brain-gut connection.
Yeah.
We have some guests coming up that'll come up after this episode that will address that as well. So stay tuned. But there's a lot that goes on, and so I think it's important that we're eating a good quality of food, but we're also taking the time to savor that food so that the brain is able to interact with that food and regulate satiety. I hate saying that word. And, just how much we're going to eat when we stop eating so that we can kind of get to that stopping when we're 80% full kind of deal. But also it's impacting how different hormones and enzymes and things are being released in response to that food that has an impact on our endothelial tissue, on our gut health, on our digestive, liver function. All these things are all intertwined. And so it's very fascinating, but I think it's one of those things that we tend to skip over. We just, we teach the food pyramid and that's it. And we don't understand the interactions for food and our physiology. And so that's probably been one of my biggest steps. So, so if I'm looking at the supplements that I have on a daily basis, it's going to be the magnesium. It's going to be, at least for some time. I don't have to do it for long duration, but I'm going to be trying out the nitric oxide stimulating supplements from from Berkeley Health rather. I'm taking Glynac ET, and I'm not sure if that's the best, and I may or may not continue that depending on how these other supplements are kind of helping in the formation of glutathione in my body. I would love to be taking Oral Wellness's, I forget what they call their spray, but it's their glutathione. It's basically a glutathione transdermal spray. I love that stuff, but it's out of my price range. And then I take the daily, I'm taking either the Mellow Mints, the Mano Mints, and then at night I take the, I forget what they call it, the Sleep Mints for Rebalance Health. Those have had, to skip ahead to the social dimension of our well-being. Those have had a dramatic effect on just my mood, my interaction with others. Kids have noticed that I'm yelling less and I'm calmer and those types of things. And so taking those on a daily basis has been very helpful for me. So that continues to help regulate my cortisol levels, helping me with sleep and so on. That's it for supplements for me. I want to eat my food. I don't want to supplement my food. So let's, anything else within the physical realm? Let's talk sleep. What are you doing? I mean, quickly talk sleep. Do you track your sleep?
No. I really don't have a way. I have a Fitbit, but it doesn't, even though it has a sleep tracking option, it actually does not track my sleep at all. So I don't have a physical way to track. So no, I'm not tracking it. I have a bedtime and then I try and utilize that as much as I can.
I've become a sleep biomarker geek. I'm really tracking that significantly. I've used the Garmin watch for probably it was about at least a year and a half. And I'm not poo pooing the Garmin watch because I think their algorithm, as Dr. Twerkin had indicated, is probably one of the better ones of all the different options. But the battery life on mine is horrible. And I've also heard from people that have like the Fitbits and the Apple Watches that the battery life just really sucks on those. So I recently purchased the Amazfit Helio strap. And for anybody viewing, I got it on right now. I'll show you on camera. If you're listening, you can kind of check it out on Amazon or on Google. I like this one. It gives me really good sleep data. It may not be exactly the same as the Garmin or the Whoop. The big difference between it and the Whoop, and I've seen a lot of different reviews of the two products, but Whoop is subscription based. And so it's a very similar watch. They look almost identical, but you have to pay on an annual basis. And, if you buy the watch, you get like so many years of subscription, but this is $99, no subscription, and it has a fantastic battery life. I mean, it is literally at least 10 days to the point where I almost forget that I need to charge. I drain about 10% of the battery every day. And so it lasts. And so I don't have to worry about, losing data on such a regular basis because I'm charging it. So I charge it, takes about an hour to fully charge, take it off for an hour, do something else, put it back on, and I'm right back to getting my, they call biocharge, heart rate variability. With sleep, it tells me how long I've slept, when and how long I've been awake, gives me my REM sleep, my deep sleep, it's about my respirations, my heart rhythm throughout sleep. It also gives me a hypopnea score, which is interesting because, as I've been using my CPAP over the last, 4 months, I get a different reading from that than my own CPAP machine tells me. Although in talking to my sleep doctor, the scores are still better, that I've improved my sleep by using the CPAP, but I'm still not quite sure that that's what I want to continue doing, especially since my wife feels like she's sleeping with Darth Vader. But, I'm able to track those scores and get those on a daily basis and be able to look at trends. So if I change my diet or, if I stay up a little bit later, or if I have pizza, or if I have alcohol, what do I do? What impact does that have on my sleep? And I think it's very helpful to really track that, because better sleep is going to give us better longevity just in terms of brain health, better muscle function, better gut health, everything. Yes, I've been tracking that. And I would encourage most of our viewers, if it's within your budget, and $99 is pretty affordable for most people. Maybe it's something you ask for a birthday or Christmas present or whatever holidays you get presents for. It's worthwhile to kind of track that. If you can afford Whoop, Whoop is good as well.
Whoop.
And then there's the Aura rings too. Those are relatively expensive also. Those are probably the high end, but I don't think there's that much separation between the high end and the more budget friendly. And I'm all budget friendly.
So the only other thing, and I know we need to move on to the next, but for physical, for me, something that I've done, we interviewed a specialist that talked about gum health and oral hygiene. And obviously that's common knowledge. They talk about that since elementary school, but man, seeing the dangers that the bacteria of our mouth actually has on the heart, on the liver, on the brain, started flossing a lot more and kind of prioritizing that just to get that locked in. So really shout out to, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but thank you, because
That was Dr. Nami Patel.
yep, Dr. Nami Patel. Yep, that was a huge aha moment for me, because it's like, why put yourself through that much health issues that can easily be prevented just adding a minute or two to your night routine. So I locked in on that. So thank you.
Yeah, I've stopped using antiseptic mouthwash. I got into a real habit of using that during COVID because it did and does have benefits in terms of killing the virus in the oral cavity, so that you kind of reduce that risk of contracting it. And I did never get COVID. But I realized as well that I probably destroyed a lot of the microbes in my mouth that would benefit my gut health. And so I kind of see that, okay, some of these issues is, I was able in COVID to really cut weight pretty easily, got leaner. But a lot of that has shifted away, and it's a lot harder right now to manage body composition and just, cholesterol being higher and things like that. It's like, okay, that might be part of the issue. I've also, I had some shoulder issues and was taking a lot of ibuprofen, naproxen, NSAIDs in order to manage the pain. And I feel like that's probably had a negative impact on my liver function as well. So I'm trying really not to take any kind of NSAID unless I absolutely need it. And then focusing more on a highly anti-inflammatory diet and trying to eat less things that are pro-inflammatory in order to manage that a little bit more effectively.
Cool.
So let's go. Intellectually, I think we could this whole podcast has been an intellectual journey for both of us, for us, hopefully for our listeners and viewers as well. So we don't have to really go down that. I've been reading a lot more, and those who watch the podcast religiously know that we've had a lot of authors on the podcast, and I tend to read every one of those books, which eats into my time a lot. But I mean, I've read some really, really fascinating stuff, and I encourage anybody who, enjoys one of our guests who is an author to purchase their book. We do offer as an Amazon affiliate to, they don't get a discount on the book, but we can make some money to help support the podcast by buying their books through Amazon using the link we provide. But this has been a definite intellectual journey for me. So do we move on to emotional, or do you have anything else?
I would just encourage our listeners to constantly seek tasks, whether it's reading, whether it's studying, just seek stuff to keep that brain sharp and have you be intellectually challenged every day. Like seek to learn more knowledge. The books Dr. Armstrong are talking about, a lot of our guests, they are phenomenal people, and they have great things to say, whether it's the science behind aging, whether it's motivation to live a better life, or maybe if you want to change subjects altogether and you want to look into historical events to learn from the past to better your future. These are all great things, and I would encourage anyone to not be stagnant with their own mind or their own sharpness, and just know that you can improve your intelligence just like you can improve your body and your muscles and everything else. You just got to put in the work to do it. That would be the only thing I would say on that.
Yeah, and I'd say challenge yourself in what you're reading. Don't just scroll the internet and absorb everything that you read and hear, because there's so much BS out there on both sides. Fact check yourself, read into the science behind some of these things that you're hearing, but read it from books and knowledgeable sources, not from the internet. Get away from just simply mindless scrolling and YouTube videos. Do watch your podcasts, particularly this particular podcast, or listen to it. Do it while you're exercising is always a good thing, while you're moving, while you're driving to or from work. Use podcasts for an intellectual tool when you can more passively absorb the information, but be active in terms of opening a book once in a while, reading the book, reading things that interest you, that maybe you haven't studied before, and have a deep conversation with people that are knowledgeable. One thing that has been a joy for me, and this kind of leads into the social, my son is a very intellectual individual, and he's got very different interests than me. And he's learning things that really weren't available to me when I was his age. And he's into, we have conversations about art, culture, politics, all these different things. And just having those deep conversations really help us to grow intellectually. And that's where I think, when we talk about the SPIES model, that the intellectual then feeds into our emotional. It's based on a foundation of the physical and the spiritual. Pull those together, and that is going to help us emotionally and even socially. So what are you doing to age well emotionally?
Well, to age well emotionally, it comes back to the spiritual aspect of it. I do believe that those are hand in glove, and I think they're, as we age in the physical, there's also a sense of mental and emotional maturity that come with it. But recognizing that a lot of things may appear to be out of our control, but if we hand it over to God, I've noticed that I can control my emotions significantly more than I ever had in the past. I can certain thoughts captive, and I don't allow. I don't know. In certain hectic situations, I don't allow the emotions to completely control my life or how I'm going to respond in that particular scenario. Now, I'm not perfect by any means. It's still a journey, but I think it's a night and day difference. I no longer have anxiety, and I no longer have depression, and I'm a lot more present in when I'm interacting with people. I don't know, it's pretty cool, and I feel joy and not just happiness, but actual joy and peace in an emotional state, and it's really cool. So I guess I hope that answers your question, because as far as what I'm doing, I'm doing my best. It's the best answer for that.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, what I'm doing to do my best, again, I would reiterate the Rebalance Health mints have really helped me balance out emotions a little bit more. I'm going to explore more of the potential like microdoses here and there of the psilocybin and just see where that can take me. A lot of it is just being more consciously aware of others. The whole SPIES model has fed my emotional well-being for years. But just being more aware of how my emotional responses are impacting others has been probably one of the things that I'm most focused on. Journaling really helps with that, a certain level of meditative practice. But also, just focusing in on the bigger spiritual picture for me has helped me emotionally. And so, I use the kind of the mantra carpe memento, seize the moment, trying to live in the moment and realizing the decisions I make right now in this instant are going to have impacts going forward. The decision that I made 5 seconds ago is past. I can't do anything about that. And I just did a recent episode on that. So I encourage the viewers to, again, we have a spiritual problem podcast where I talk about the two questions that I'm often asked, and we've addressed them somewhat on here. The first question being, if you could go back in time and change anything, what would you change? And my response is always, I wouldn't change anything. So it's that understanding that whatever has happened in the past has happened for the purpose of getting us all, whatever decision I made 20, 30, 40 years ago has had an impact on others. And that has led to this cascade of different events that we have no control over. And we can't even begin to define how those would change. But if I'd go back and change that one decision, who knows how that would change the world, the universe right now. We think our decisions are insignificant and small, but insignificant decisions impact a lot of different people. We had Rob Kelly on. It was actually the other podcast that he brought this up, but he talked about, I'll tell people I can change this person's life in 2 words. And he said, walks by the person, says, nice sneakers. And then you just kind of walk away and you kind of look back and you see, that person will be looking at their sneakers. They're kind of smiling. They're standing taller. They're feeling pretty, they are nice sneakers, and then they walk on. They're going to interact differently with the next person. They might go home and rather than yelling at their wife, they might compliment their wife. They're going to be more favorable to be around. And it's just going to have a positive impact, not only on that person, but on every person that person impacts, and then every other person that is impacted by that person, and so on and so on. And so that perspective helps me a lot in terms of aging well. And then it just recently kind of came across what I call the Puri question, which I don't know if we've talked about it on this podcast yet, but that's the question that Stephen Puri asked me about. If you were given a magic wand that you could only use once, but it could change anything in the world, how would you use it? And I'm not going to reveal my answer to that, but it kind of gives me a perspective on the importance of what I'm doing, what power I have in the world. And it also reminds me that I literally have that magic wand available to me every moment of my life. So I have a one-time opportunity in the decision that I make right now that I can't take back, that is going to have an impact on the universe. And all of those decisions that I make are having that impact. And so when I think about that, it gives me better emotional well-being. It helps me understand that, shit's going to happen. But it not necessarily happening to change me, but it does change me. But it's an opportunity for me to grow and to be a better person, to make a better universe. And everything that happens to us, good, bad, or indifferent, is all part of what, Teilhard would have referred to as that spiritual evolution. And I think we are evolving. I personally believe we are evolving as humans toward his omega point. Maybe not perfect. Again, that's one person's perspective. And I add into it my perspective. But as I look at all the crap that's going on in the United States and across the globe, with just the division and the animosity and the hatred and all these kind of things, I look at it with a level of optimism that this is just simply a period of friction in humankind that is either going to break us or propel us forward. And I'm optimistic enough to think that it's going to propel us toward being better people. And so that's kind of my emotional piece. So what about social? We'll kind of wrap up with social.
Well,
What are you doing?
Well, with social, I think, I don't know. I feel like socialness, I'm more using your example of, hey, nice shoes. I think it's a matter, what I've learned is it's not what you say, it's how you say it, but it's also who's saying it. So if you walk up to someone and you're like, nice shoes, totally going to change their perspective. But if you walk up to them, you're like, nice shoes, it's going to have a different reaction. So I'm learning from a social point of view that it's not necessarily what you say or even how you mean it. It also could be how the person is interpreting it. Whether they're reading your nonverbals, your body language, or the tones and the inflections, all these little things make a difference. And I'm getting more involved in my church, and I'm actually a part of our youth group. I'm one of the leaders there, and well, not a leader, but taking on a leader role, and it's awesome. But let me tell you, this Gen Z, Gen Alpha, this younger generation, they are different than my generation when I was young and I was a teenager. So being a part of that youth, it's just really taught me that it's not just what we say and how we say it, but it's also our nonverbals as well.
Yeah. So for me with the social piece, it's just, again, trying to explore deeper social connectedness, keeping it purposeful. I think that's one of the most important things I've learned over the last 3.5 years with this podcast, is that social connections is probably one of the most important dimensions of, or components of, or pillars of aging well. And, when you look at the blue zones, that's probably one of the most common underlying themes in all those areas, is that people have strong social connections. So whether it's belonging to church groups, participating in church groups, having, belonging to a club. I don't have a lot of close physical personal relationships here in Oregon yet. And I know it's only been 17 years. But I've found a lot more connection to older friends. Talk about Jay, who coined the acronym SPIES for us. Jay and I hadn't seen each other since we graduated high school, and we have gotten a deeper friendship and bond just by calling once in a while through the podcast and such. I mentioned Sandy and Sam and Griff. Just trying to, even if the relationship is going to be virtual, trying to make the deeper spiritual connection with the people. And, if I have conversations with people that you're feeling that relationship is so shallow, I take the old Bob from What About Bob approach. Is I just hang up. It's not you. It's just a bad connection, and just move on. Right. And so not being overly negative in social interactions. So using social media in a more positive fashion. If it's negative, just kind of getting the hell out of there. If relationships aren't deep enough, then move on. Find that core, find your 5, 6, 10 people that you can have close, deep relationships with, and focus more on the closer proximity relationships, your family, and so I'm really, really focused on how am I impacting the life of my wife, my kids, trying to build deeper relationships with my kids. Liam and I went through, as most parents do when their kids are older teenagers, really a rough spot for a few months there where he almost wasn't even talking to me. And now we're having like really deep, full conversations. And a lot of it is just me having to let go. I would kind of summarize the social connectedness with I am third. And the challenge when trying to apply the I am third philosophy is that we have a tendency as human beings to maybe do that, to put our God first, put our family and friends second, and say, okay, I'm third. I'm going to stress the importance of their relationship, their needs. But you sometimes start sitting back and say, wait a minute, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm sacrificing here, but nobody is sacrificing for me. And then you start to back off from that and start thinking about me. So there has to be that good balance between focusing in on your own health. And again, if you're focusing on the spiritual, the physical, intellectual, and emotional well-being, it's a little bit easier to give of yourself in those social connections. If we're not, and that's usually kind of the biggest red flag to me that I need to work on those other 4 dimensions, is when I start having a bit more struggle with social connections, with some of my relationships. And so really just kind of balancing all of those areas, focusing in on the 6 pillars, getting my regular exercise and physical activity, trying to focus more on resistance training over cardiovascular, but not neglecting cardiovascular. Maybe doing a little bit more high intensity interval training for cardiovascular, but trying to do low intensity walking and doing all that more. Just getting as much activity as possible. Really focusing in on my diet so that my diet is going to impact my physical activity, my sleep, my body composition. That's been a big piece of what I'm doing to age well. So trying to really zero in on the healthiest of diets. Looking at my body composition, trying to build muscle, build strength. I'm more focused on building the strength and maintaining good solid muscle as opposed to trying to think I'm going to be a bodybuilder in my 60s and put on a lot of muscle mass that I've never been able to put on. But I'm, lifting, really focusing on maintaining muscle mass and strength. Smoking has never been an issue. And we didn't even bring that up in today's conversation as one of the 6 pillars. But really, I avoid even being around people that are smoking. So that I don't get that secondhand smoke. Let's see. So we covered those 4. The sleep, talked about sleep and really focused in on sleep is a major importance. Again, top priority is putting the purpose in those social connections and trying to have good, solid social connectedness to help me to age well. Any summary of your own?
No, that's beautiful. I think he covered it all, to be honest.
Well, again, we've shared this today to underscore what we are doing, because in nearly every episode, we're asking guests, what are they doing to age well? And you get a different perspective. Most everybody is working within those dimensions or those pillars in what they're doing to age well. And really underscoring the fact that nowhere in the SPIES model or the 6 pillars do we talk about biohacking or even just a drug therapy or medical therapy treatment trying to reverse the aging process. We're all about trying to, from conception on in life, trying to age well. And so that's what I want to underscore in this conversation is hopefully people are picking up, okay, these are things that I can do, baby steps toward aging well, make small changes in your spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social dimensions, improve on those different pillars as you're able. And, if we keep doing those to whatever capacities we do it, we may not hit 120 years, but the goal was not necessarily to live longer. It's to live longer, younger. And that's what we're after. And so I'm just going to end this with, just make the baby steps, keep doing what you're doing in progressive micro steps every day and keep aging well.
Aging well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.